What were the findings of the STEP HF-pEF trial?
The findings were very definitive, I think, is a short summary answer of it. It was statistically significant across the board. So in the KCCQ endpoint, there was an 8-point difference between those in placebo and those who are on semaglutide. So clinically relevant, I think, is about 4 points. So it was significantly different. So the patients who were on semaglutide felt much better, had far less symptoms, and were able to do more in their daily life with increased exercise capacity. The weight loss, they showed an 11% body weight loss in the semaglutide versus the placebo. So both the endpoints were statistically significant. When they then looked at the hierarchical secondary endpoints, again, they met every single one. So I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. But some of the key points that came out of it were the effect on the 6-minute walk test. So they had an improved ability to walk distances for 6 minutes. So that's a classic measurement within heart failure trials, which indicates, increased exercise tolerance. For example, they don't become too breathless to be able to keep exercising. So that was their first layer. And some of the interesting things that came out. So they looked at heart failure events. So that is normally death or hospitalization. Now, they were all adjudicated, which means doctors looked at them to make sure they were an actual event. It wasn't just what was being submitted. There were only 13 events in the whole trial, which is not unusual. In HFpEF, you don't tend to see quite so much hospitalization. If you look at HFrEF trials, hospitalization is a classic secondary endpoint because they get unwell and they come into hospital. That doesn't happen so much in HFpEF. They tend to be much fitter individuals in comparison. But out of the 13 events that occurred, 12 of those events were in the placebo arm and only 1 was in the semaglutide arm. So you cannot claim that it prevents hospitalization or anything like that, but it would show a very big trend towards there being much less events in the semaglutide arm than there were in the placebo. And then there were other things that it threw up. So there were exploratory endpoints, and they looked at CRP and NT-proBNP. So CRP is an inflammatory endpoint, is an inflammatory marker that we often see measured in things like infections and things like that. And NT-proBNP, so that's N-terminal pro beta natriuretic peptide. I was going to wonder what it was. We all just use the acronym because it's much easier. But that is a protein that's released by the heart when it's in trouble, effectively. So when we are diagnosing heart failure, we do that blood test first to determine whether they need an echo, because if it's high enough, we'll then do an echo, and it gives us an idea of severity of disease. So much higher numbers normally indicate much more severe disease. There or thereabouts. It's not a straight line, but it gives you an idea. So they looked at those markers, and in semaglutide, both those markers were significantly lower in the semaglutide treated patients than in the placebo arm. So again, it doesn't tell you that it makes heart failure better, but what it gives an indicator of is there's much reduced inflammation and there's potential sort of cardiac remodeling going on. So they're exploratory endpoints for further investigation. But because of the way the trial was designed, what it's really telling us is that in obesity, what they think is the reason that obesity may be causative is related to inflammatory processes. So if semaglutide is reducing those inflammatory processes, potentially you are going to end up with cardiac remodeling and improvement overall in how the heart functions by using this drug versus not doing anything at all. It's not just the weight loss that's causing the benefits.
Now, these results were achieved using a GLP-1 receptor agonist, but wouldn't any treatment that causes weight loss be equally effective?
So interestingly, no. So there have been previous trials in obesity and weight loss programs. So sort of your sort of classic weight loss exercise diet programs, and they didn't show the same. They did show benefit, they did show improvements in quality of life, but nowhere near the same level as what was seen in semaglutide. So we know that losing weight in HFpEF is of benefit. We absolutely know that. And I think that's why, well, I suspect that's exactly why they designed the trial the way it was to show these other markers that weren't measured in the original obesity trial, but looking at, is it actually just weight loss that causes it, or are there other reasons behind it? And there's so much we still don't know. We have to keep looking at, HFpEF is a new thing, and obesity and heart failure. And we talk about HFpEF because it is highly related, but we still have obesity and HFrEF as well. So this whole obesity field is really ongoing, and the weight loss itself wasn't significant enough in many of the previous trials. So there was something extra seen in these that weren't previously. So we know weight loss is of benefit, and there's no, taken away from lifestyle management, but it still didn't achieve as much as it did in these trials.